Culture Crew, and welcome back to another exciting edition of Kulture Kids Storytime. We have been reading the very fascinating story that talks about our culture and history as it relates to being in America, entitled Heart and Soul. In this story, we have covered how things were during slavery, Reconstruction, the Civil War, and now we've come to the Great Migration. The Great Migration was a period in our American history where Black people were looking for a better life. For many years, they were stuck in the South and they were forced to endure Jim Crow laws. And they were looking for a way to come out of that. And so there was a huge shift of Black folks from the South that were moving up north looking for a better life. Although they thought that this would be a better situation, in ways it was, but it was still very, very challenging for many of our people just to survive. So let's dive into this chapter and read a little bit more about the Great Migration. Freedom could make folks proud, but it didn't make them rich. Felix Haywood, former slave. The years after Reconstruction were some of the hardest and darkest since slavery. After we made up some progress, the rug was pulled out from under us, and control of the South ended up in the hands of the same breed of people who had always had it. We were expected to keep quiet, walk with our eyes downcast, and bow to white folks, being ever so careful not to cause trouble. It was a dangerous time for us. We were being kidnapped, lynched, shot, and burned all over the South. We had to stick together and watch out for each other like a big family. Millions of Black folks were trapped in the South under the thumb of Jim Crow, and we might have stayed that way a lot longer if it weren't for all of the trouble in Europe. Now, it's not particularly easy to describe what was happening in Europe at the time, but I can tell you that in 1914, Archduke Ferdinand, who was next in line to the throne of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, was assassinated. In a very short time, countries all over Europe started choosing sides, lining up for war, and before we knew it, countries all around the world were pulled into their mess, including ours. With war coming, America needed to build weapons. There were plenty of factories up north that at the time were filled with European immigrant workers. Women and Black folks were generally not welcome, but many more people were needed to build the weapons for the coming war. As the fighting began in Europe, America stopped letting most of the immigrants into the country. With so many new factories, there weren't enough immigrants to take those jobs. So as a last resort, the factory owners gave the jobs to women and Black folks. Word about the new jobs spread like wildfire. The Chicago Defender, a Black newspaper that was passed around in churches and barbershops, invited all to come north. On railroad trains, porters bragged about how well Black folks were doing up north. Family members who had already gone there wrote letters saying that they earned several times more than what they had made on the farm, and that Black folks could vote, go to school, in fancy movie theaters, and dress like movie stars. It all sounded pretty fine. Despite the trouble we had with white folks and the bull weevil beetle that was eating up the cotton and destroying farmers' crops, most of us had grown to love the South and never seriously thought about leaving. The South was home. But like hundreds of thousands of Black folks who weighed the trouble of living there against the opportunities up north, we felt it was time to go. Now, leaving was easier said than done. White folks didn't exactly want us to go. After all, we worked their fields and paid their rents. If we all upped and left, they would have been in a real fix. So they tried their best to stop us. They banned Northern Black papers. Police officers harassed Black folks on the trains and at the stations. Clerks ignored us when we tried to buy train tickets. And they even stopped the train service in some places altogether. But it didn't work. Honey, no matter what they did, they couldn't stop us from leaving any more than they could stop the rain from falling. We had made up our minds. My family went by train like most Black folks, but some rode on horseback or on a mule, or even walked. It took almost a full day to ride by train from Virginia to Chicago. We celebrated when we made it across the Mason-Dixon line and moved from the Jim Crow cars to the cars where white folks sat. Some people even started praying and singing. The train was full of Black folks on their way to Chicago, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Detroit, or New York City. We learned that Southern Black folks were pouring into neighborhoods like Harlem and South Side of Chicago, bringing Southern comforts like jazz and blues music and Southern cooking to the big cities. When we moved north, we had to change our way of doing things. In the South, we mostly depended on the owner of the land for what we needed. Food, shelter, schools, raggedy as they were, and work. Everything was purchased on credit, but up north, we had to find it all ourselves. It made us much more independent. In many ways, life was better for us. Pap, Daddy, Mother, and all the grown folks in my family found plenty of work, and we felt we had found a bit of freedom. But we also learned that Jim Crow had made the trip right along with us. There was only one part of town where we could find a place to live, and the best jobs were closed to us. We also didn't know that we had all walked right into the middle of what would be a huge fight. Owners of the factories were making more money than they could count, while everybody else made pennies on the dollar, working long hours in unsafe factories, and it made a lot of people angry. Workers formed labor unions and organized strikes on the railroads, in mills, coal mines, shipping docks. Seemed like everybody was ready to strike. Everybody but Black folks. When we tried it, the factory owners just ignored us. Only the porters made any headway some years later. The owners fought dirty too, honey. When white folks picketed, the owners knew Black workers weren't allowed into many of the unions, so they brought them into the factories to break the strike. It made for some real problems between Black and white folks up north, and for very dangerous times. There were race riots and lynchings all over the North and South because of it. Like most Black folks, Booker T. Washington, our most popular leader in the early 1900s, wanted equal treatment. He felt the best way to get it was for us to stop all the fussing and get to work. In the years after Reconstruction, he built Tuskegee Institute into a great school that taught Black folks skills they could use to get ahead. Booker T thought we could gain respect by providing services to white folks and by showing that we could make our own money. White folks loved the idea, of course, but many Black folks disagreed with him. The problem was bigger than money. Racism had been spoon-fed to generations of American children. For hundreds of years, and it had convinced many Black and white folks that white people were better than Black people in every way. The hatred it stirred between the two races took on a life of its own. America badly needed to find a way to get past it. In any case, the fight for equality was put on hold when America entered the First World War in the middle of April 1917. Black men were eager to join the military, although very few Black troops saw combat. Most Black soldiers worked in labor battalions. The war ended about a year later in 1918. It's funny how things work out sometimes. War is a terrible thing, but strangely enough, this one did Black folks some good. It had pulled over 1 million of us out of the South and helped us onto our feet. So this just shows that, at every turn, we're trying to do better. We're trying to get ahead. But there are still people out there that do not want us to succeed, and they will do anything by any means necessary to hamper our success. So when you think about your daily lives and things that you're going through, remember that you are resilient. You come from a people that no matter what was handed to them, they would figure out a way and they would continue to prosper, and that lives inside of you. So I hope that you enjoyed this section of Heart and Soul, and you'll tune in next time as we dive into chapter 8 in the book. Have a great one, guys, and see you soon.